Chelsea, would you just lead us in prayer? We'll all pray with you, but just lead us in prayer to start off with, if you would.
Lord, I thank you for this night to learn truth. Lord, I pray, God, that you would just open up our minds and our hearts and our ears to hear you clearly, Lord, that you would bring forth truth and revelation tonight, Lord, and you would prepare our hearts to receive, God, and that you would just bring forth wisdom and revelation and truth tonight, Lord, and we just thank you for that.
Thank you, Lord. And everybody just receive it and say amen.
Amen.
Amen. I just remember Katie's coming here in a second, too, so when some of the new ones come in, just Megan, if you would get them the copies. I know you can get them organized there. Some people had to work, couldn't get here right at 7. I'm going to kick the shoes off so we can just get up close and personal. Halloween. This is the disclaimer, and I'm going to say 2 things about my outfit. You will notice that I do have on a shirt that says love. I did that on purpose. Love, 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 love. Because we teach this with love. I gave the example on Facebook today that I have friends who come visit here sometimes who don't believe that women should wear pants, who don't believe women should wear makeup, that don't believe women should cut their hair. That is their belief. And I like to hear why they believe that. I'm interested in knowing why they believe that, and I don't condemn them for what they believe, and they're kind and loving to me. They don't condemn me for what I believe. So I have found it very interesting that people can get so upset over this subject of Halloween. Megan, can you say what you said the other day about if somebody had told you to...
Like if somebody had told me years ago that the thing other Christians would get most angry at me about was the fact that I don't celebrate Halloween. Like it's shocking, you know? Because I never go around saying you shouldn't celebrate it. It's just when they find out I don't and they ask me why, when I start to say, well, you know, this is just my personal belief, they get very upset. And I never bring it up with people because like
I don't either.
I don't want to, you know, get into a discussion with people.
Right.
But they get very, very defensive and upset about it.
That's mind-blowing to me. She's right, though. I don't know if you've noticed it, but when I say to people, I've had Christians get really upset with me. One of my good friends, he doesn't even live in this state, last year, I think, came on my Facebook post about Halloween and said, he wouldn't mind me telling this, it was public knowledge anyway on Facebook. He said, you're sounding like Jerry Falwell, which I think this guy's Catholic. He said, you're sounding like Jerry Falwell, Leslie. I've never heard this side of you, this judgmental side. And all I said was, I don't believe in celebrating Halloween, and here's why, but I love you if you do, because in my past, I certainly did. When I was a Christian, I celebrated. So this really is a touchy subject. And to be cute, the other thing I was going to say while I go about my outfit is, yes, I'm wearing a shirt that says love, and yes, I'm wearing white after Labor Day. And don't tell my mama. She's sitting right there. I might wear it again this winter. I don't know. If you have questions at any time, raise your hand and ask me. Let's just be very real. And if you want to tell me why you think Christians should have trunk-or-treat or harvest festivals on Halloween night, or why Christians can't even go trick-or-treating and just spread the love of God, tell me. I want to hear that. I know. I read something today because I still was studying this. Even though some of this is old information, I've still been studying it currently. I read an ex-witch who said she believes that Christians should be able to go out and celebrate Halloween and just spread the love of God. So not everybody who came out of Satanism or witchcraft thinks that you should just leave Halloween to the side. More of them do than go the way of the other lady that I mentioned, I have noticed. And I don't know if you know any ex-witches or ex-Satanists. You may. We actually have somebody here who couldn't get here tonight. I was really hoping she would be here. Who came out of the occult, who came out of Satanism. And when you talk to her about Halloween, now that she's a Christian, she's like, no, don't want to have anything to do with it. Don't do Halloween. And I have another friend, an ex-witch who lives in Florida. And she came up and taught in Walnut Cove, maybe when did Peggy come? 10, 15 years ago, maybe. And Peggy, man, she'll blow your mind with the stuff she can tell you about Halloween. And the whole thought that she gave us back when she talked to us years ago about it was that the Satanists and the witches and the occultists and the pagans, and they're all different things, they laugh at Christians. They think it's hilarious that Christians are celebrating Halloween. Anton LaVey, which he's not alive anymore, he was the founder of the Church of Satan. He literally did say, because I researched it, he literally did say that he's glad that Christians let their children worship the devil at least one night a year. And that really bothered me. No, I don't think for a second that when I dressed her up in a little ballerina costume and took her door to door that we were worshiping the devil. I don't believe that. But I don't like I don't even like to think that the Satanists and the occultists and the witchcraft people are looking at me thinking, we got her, watch her, look at her, she's celebrating Halloween. I don't like that. Was I worshiping the devil? You know I wasn't. Who's been trick-or-treating in your life in this room? I mean, let's face it, we've been trick-or-treating. We weren't worshiping the devil. But Be Ye Separate was a sermon I preached a week or two ago, and I think that's what God's telling his people more and more that it's time for. What about Halloween? On your paper, I'm going to have to read all of this for the sake of the camera for the people who are tuning in. Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I've mentioned this a few different times, but a lot of you haven't been here on Sunday mornings, obviously, because you go to different churches, some of you. I've mentioned how I've cast a lot of devils out of people. I used to work, not really side by side, but I assisted a lady, Emily Dotson. If y'all know Emily, I know Belinda, I think, knows who Emily Dotson is. She's in her 90s now up in King. I guess she's still alive. But she had a deliverance ministry. And we cast devils out of many, many, many people. A lot of, well, you get used to it. It's not a scary thing after you're just used to it. You just tell them to go. You're not scared of these things. But a lot of times when we dealt with Christians, and you say, what? You cast devils out of Christians? Not out of their spirit, man. Because when you are saved, I don't believe you can be possessed by a devil at all. Can a demon oppress you? Can a demon try to come into your soul realm, which is your mind, your will, emotions? Absolutely. Not your spirit realm. Can it get into your body and try to make you sick? Absolutely. A lot of illnesses are demonic. And when I've dealt with some of these people, when it came to deliverance sessions, there was always an open door. These things can't just come into your life. A lot of times the open door was Christians messing with things of darkness. It was Ouija boards. It was astrology. It was horoscopes. And I'm going to do a whole nother teaching that is not about Halloween. That's about the things that Christians are delving into that the Bible says no. That God says these are an abomination and they're evil. And it's opening doors. And people have children who are having panic attacks and children who are oppressed and they don't know why my child's going through this, or they have themselves, they walk in their house and go, I don't know, I just feel something bad in my house. Well, what have you opened the door to? I've opened the door in my life before with things that I have aligned myself with that were of darkness. I don't mean some big open sin. It was something that people just take as no big deal. And I thought, oh, sure, that's fine. We can't even dabble in that stuff. Don't give the devil even a toehold. Because you give him even a toehold, he is going to want to come in and get a clawhold and even more. So because I've seen so many people open a door, yes, even through things like Halloween things and horror movies, then I don't even want to deal with it. How can I cast devils out of people and then dabble in things that devils are associated with? Isaiah 5:13. My people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. That's the New King James Version of that scripture. Again, my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. That goes exactly with what I just told you. A lot of people being held in a bondage. Christians. I'm talking about Christians. The world, it's a given. They're in bondage. I'm talking about Christians. They're in bondage and captivity. They don't know why. Why can't I get free? Why is this tormenting me? There's been an open door somewhere, but we can deal with that. We can deal with that. Jeremiah 10:2. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen. You got a lot of people these days saying, well, we can take Halloween and we can redeem it for God. How do you redeem something that was never God's in the first place? The roots and origins of Halloween were never godly. Now, we're not talking about Catholicism with All Hallows Eve, and, we're going to talk about that here in just a second. Even those things that seemed holy were a compromise with pagans. They took a pagan let's redeem it and let's make it a holy day. Well, my friend who's the ex-witch in Florida, her name is Peggy Menzel, if you want to look her up online. Peggy Menzel had a vision one time where she saw, and I may not get it just right, this is the gist of it. She saw something really, really evil, like this plant with ugly roots. I'm probably elaborating and making up stuff she didn't really say, but the gist was a really ugly rooted plant that came up. And they chopped it off in the vision. It was chopped off. And when it came back, it was this beautiful, beautiful flowering plant. But when she looked at the roots, God took her underground to look at the roots, and the roots were still those ugly, creepy, crawly, eerie roots. In other words, the roots never changed. Now, you can take something that used to be God's, and then the enemy took it. You can redeem that if it used to be God's, but you can't take something that had evil, creepy, crawly, eerie roots and then dress it up for God. Because no matter how good it looks on the surface, and I feel the Holy Ghost, I know I'm on it here by God, you can dress it up all you want, but underneath it's the same eerie roots that aren't of God. Now, Deuteronomy 12, 2 through 4. This was God's directive to the people of Israel. This is the NIV version. Destroy completely all the places on the high mountains, on the hills, and under every spreading tree where the nations you are dispossessing worship their gods. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and burn their Asherah poles in the fire. Cut down the idols of their gods and wipe out their names from those places. You must not worship the Lord your God in their way. God didn't play. He said, when you come into the land where the heathens are, don't take what they do and try to do something good with it. You tear it down. You don't dabble in it. Same thing with Deuteronomy 12, a little further down in that chapter, verses 30 and 31. After they have been destroyed before you, be careful not to be ensnared by inquiring about their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods? We will do the same. You must not worship the Lord your God in their way, because in worshiping their gods, they do all kinds of detestable things the Lord hates. You can't dress it up and make it pretty when it came from paganism, is what he's saying. All right, now let's get into a little more of the history. What is the origin of Halloween? It was originally the ancient feast of, and that word looks like Samhain, but it's actually pronounced Samhain. So the ancient feast of Samhain, it came from Druids in Celtic tribes. Now when you're talking about the Celtic regions of Europe, the Celts came from the mainland of Europe, over where France, Germany, all those countries are, came from the mainland of Europe and went to Great Britain. And the Celts heavily populated England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. So a lot of your traditions that I'm talking about here came from the Great Britain area, including Ireland, Scotland. So the Feast of Samhain came from the Druids and Celtic tribes in Britain, also Gaul, G-A-U-L, which was France, ancient France, and Northern Europe. Now the Celts believed that at this Feast of Samhain, which is when we celebrate Halloween now, they believed the barrier between the real world and the spirit world was very thin. They believed that it was a time that if you want to know your future, you could find it. It was a time that if you wanted to talk to your dead ancestors, you could. If you wanted to call on the spirit realm and get answers from beyond the grave, that you could. Because the veil, they believed, was so thin at that time. Now, I started really researching this again today with modern witchcraft, Wicca. Most of y'all heard of that. That is what we say most witches now, in the U.S. especially, participate in Wicca. Then you have pagans. Now, people who practice, I don't mean just people that don't know the Lord. There are people who call themselves pagans. They are not necessarily witches. Most of the time, they're not. But pagans simply believe that you can celebrate all of these old pagan holy days, as they call them, and that they don't believe in the one true God that we believe in. Then you got people who are Satanists. Witches are not necessarily Satanists. But you've got all these people, and I would caution you to use wisdom when you go to these websites. I prayed before I went to all these websites, and I would pray about which ones to look at, because some of them are really, really just mind-blowingly eerie when you go and look at these things. But I felt I had to study it for this. And when I studied it, they still believe exactly what I'm telling you right now. That the veil was very, very thin on that day. And that the supernatural is very possible, but not the supernatural in the way that we're talking about with Jesus. They believe that the same thing, that the barrier is very thin between the real world and the spirit world. They believe the same thing on May Day. You know, that's another teaching we'll have to do sometime about May Day, because it seems so sweet, you know, little children just go dance around the maypole and hold those little ribbons. It was not at all sweet the way it started. And it was called the Feast of Beltane. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but that's what it looks like. So again, that was another day that the veil was supposedly very thin. Now, the Feast of Samhain was mingled with another feast that was a Roman feast, the Feast of Pomona. Now, Pomona was the harvest goddess that the Romans worshipped long, long ago. Now, you got to realize something. You say, well, why are we talking about the Romans? I thought we were talking about the Celts. Well, remember, the Romans started taking over all of Europe. So the Romans came to Great Britain, and they took it over for a long time. Some of the old Roman roads are even still there. When they took it over, they brought their feasts to Great Britain. And one of them was the Feast of Pomona. This pagan feast was held at the same time as the Feast of Samhain. So you got a Celtic feast and a Roman feast that were held at about the same time, and they began to merge somewhat. Also mixed in was Fernalia, which is the Roman Festival of the Dead. It was originally celebrated February 21st, but later became known to be celebrated at the same time as all these other ones. In other words, if you're going to celebrate Feast of the Dead and God of the Dead, let's just do it all at the same time, was their thinking. And they mingled a lot of these. Here's what I mentioned earlier. All of these above feasts that you just heard about were absorbed by Roman Catholicism. Now, I'm not bashing Catholic people. I got a lot of good Catholic friends, and I believe they'll be in heaven, you know, with me and you. So I'm not bashing Catholics. We're talking about ancient Catholicism here, and what they did, just to make it very simple, is the Catholics said, here we are, and we're trying to take over all these pagan people and make them Christians. But we got a problem, because when we're trying to take over and say, hey, we're going to be a Christian nation, they keep on to celebrate all these feasts. They love all their old feasts. That's the one thing the pagans don't want to give up is their old feasts. So what can we do? Let's think. Oh, I know what we could do. We could still let them celebrate their old feasts, but dress up those feasts and call them something different. And we can say it's a godly thing now, and then when we do that, they'll come into the church, and they'll want to be Christians because they won't have to give up their old ways. Now think about that. Let that sink in just a minute. That's so contrary to what God said, to give up your old ways. When you become a Christian and you repent, you leave the old lifestyle behind, and you move forward into a new lifestyle, and God had his own feast. When you became a Christian, even the early Christians celebrated some of the feasts we still do here. Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. The early church celebrated that with the Jews because they're still the feast of the Lord. They're not Jewish feasts. They're the feast of the Lord. So I went and literally read yesterday the edict, the order, the command, the mandate that came out, and I think it was 601 AD. Can't remember if it was Pope Gregory. Is that on your page somewhere? I think it was. There's Pope Boniface IV. That was in, it may have been him. One of those popes. I read the entire edict that he issued where he said, we're going to do just what I told you. We're going to take the pagan feasts and we're going to call them Feast of the Lord so that we can win the pagans. They'll come on along with us and not have to give up the things that they love. I don't agree with that. I understand that the Catholic popes thought they were maybe doing a good thing, but I really believe that is a way that the enemy slipped one in on the church world back then. Now, Pope Boniface IV in the 7th century, that's in the 600s, he replaced Fernalia, remember that's the Roman Feast of the Dead, with All Saints' Day. Now, another word for that is All Hallows' Day. So you hear Halloween in that already. We're getting ready to see where Halloween really came from. So he took Fernalia and these other feasts and called it All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Day. Because hallow means you make something holy. So saint is a holy person. So that's why he called it All Hallows' Day. And it was used as a day to honor dead saints. They moved it from February 21st, remember that's when Fernalia originally was. They moved it to May 13th originally. However, that didn't last long, it lasted about 100 years. Pope Gregory III, in the 8th century, that's the 700s AD, he took All Saints' Day, which is, already February to May, and he moved it to November 1st, and that's where it still is today. So for the Catholic Church, they still have All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day on November 1st. You say, well, what's Halloween got to do with that? Because the night before the feast is called Een, which is like E', which means even. Just like Christmas Eve. The day before Christmas is Christmas Eve. You could call it Christmasine, just like you call it Halloween. Halloween is the evening before All Hallows Day or All Saints Day. Does that make sense? Okay. So, there it is on the paper. I'm just going off the top of my head and didn't realize it's on your paper. October 31st became All Hallows evening, like Christmas Eve. November 2nd became All Souls Day because they realized, wait a minute, on November 1st, we got All Saints Day. We're honoring all the people who were Christians that went on and died and went to heaven. But what about everybody that just died, whether they were Christian or not? That's why November 2nd is All Souls Day. That means everybody, whether you knew the Lord or not. Now, for the original people who celebrated the early version of Halloween, Halloween was considered the end of the year. November 1st was considered their new year. So your new year at that time was not January 1. That came later. They felt that this was a time, right about October 31st, November 1st, that the earth started passing from the warmth of summer and late fall to cold. That it started passing from things of light to things of darkness. And they knew winter was coming. From growth and harvest to death, when all the trees die and the flowers die and all the crops are gone now. So they saw it as the start of a new year. And really, if you think about it, that makes good sense. If you were looking at a new year as a time when everything stops, it goes into darkness and cold and death of winter, that makes good sense. Because winter, by January 1, it's winter, way winter. But this is about when it really does start to get cold. Now, this last, on page 1, the last part, who were Samhain and the Druids? I always laugh at that because when I read it, it makes me think of like a name for a rock band or something. Samhain and the Druids. Because literally, there was teamwork here because he was a god of the Druids. Samhain was the alleged, I say alleged because a lot of your pagan and witchcraft websites say, he was not the god of the dead, he was this, he was that. They all disagree on who he really was. So I say he was alleged Lord of the Dead. The name Samhain actually means end of summer. But the ancients believed that there was a god of death who brought about the end of summer. So they called him by the name, which means end of summer. They thought he came and brought the cold. He brought the darkness of the winter. He brought the death of the crops. Now, on October 31st, Samhain supposedly assembled the souls of those who had died in the past year. Supposedly, their spirits left their graves to wander the earth or go visit where they used to live, or to go visit their families. Then, their souls were put into animal bodies to pay for sins. Like if you'd been really bad, if Jamie'd been a really bad sinner, she's my old high school friend, we can joke like this, she's a good Christian woman, but if she'd been a really bad sinner, her soul might be put in a toad, And then there's Mandy, and Mandy, she never did anything too bad, she's just a normal sinner. Her soul might be put into a puppy dog. That's the way they believed way back then. There's still some religions that still believe that sort of thing, we know. Now, so that's who Samhain was and some of the things that the people who followed him believed. But who are the Druids? Well, it's a Gaulish French word that it comes from. Like Druides, it means those who know the oak. Because they believed oak trees were sacred. And they worshipped under oak trees. So that's why their name means, those who know the oak. Druids. All right, let's see. Make sure I got my papers right. Yeah. All right, next, page 2. Is everybody Everybody got the page that says, what were the original customs of Halloween? Everybody got that? And we're going to talk, there's more in here about the Druids. I don't want you to feel like I just left that, like just chopped it off. Who were the Druids? They worshipped under the oak. They were just a pagan religion. And Samhain was part of their religion, as were many other pagan gods. And they did worship under oak trees and do some other things that we're going to discuss in a minute. So the original customs of Halloween, I've numbered those. And there are more. I just picked out the biggies. Number one, trick or treat. Trick or treat's over 2,000 years old. At least 2,000 years old. So you can't take trick or treat and say that it's Christian and we're going to redeem it back for the Lord, because it was around before Jesus was even, lived and died, basically. What is it all about? Good things to eat were set out to please evil spirits to keep people safe from them. So on this night, October 31st, when supposedly the veil is thin and there's spirits roaming because Samhain set them all loose from their graves and they're going back to visit where they used to live, you didn't want them to come to your house. You were scared. People were scared of them. It's a fear-based thing. Trick or treat was fear-based, totally, in the old days. You would set out really good stuff, beef and mutton and honey and different. You just set out good stuff in hopes that they would leave you alone, that the demons wouldn't come and torment you if you would set out the good treats. You see why you go and say trick or treat? And there's more to it. Let's get into it. And I gave more examples of things they would set out. Mutton legs, honey, poultry, wine, eggs, butter, corn, potatoes, even money, even coins. Now, if you didn't do that, they could trick you. If you did not treat them, they were allowed to trick you. People believed. In other words, they could destroy something at your house. They could come into your house and try to do something supernaturally, bring sickness or something in your house if you didn't treat them. Again, totally fear-based with people scared of demons. Demons are real. I mean, this stuff is for real. But people living in fear? But they didn't know any better back then. Later, peasants, poorer people, not your rich people, went from house to house to collect offerings to Mukalla. I may not be pronouncing that right. He was, we think, a Druid god, another Druid deity. I put a question mark because, again, people disagree on who he really was. But from the best I can see, he was possibly a Druid god. There was even a procession led by a white-robed man wearing a horse head mask. The young men would walk behind him blowing cow's horns. They would go to each farm and tell each farmer, your property's due to Mukalla. And then the farmer would have to open up his purse and give some money or something to these young men, or bad luck would come. They might burn your barn. They might steal some of your produce or some of your animals if you didn't give what was owed to this god. Gods always required sacrifice in pagan religions. Y'all know that from history in school. You studied it all. It's the same thing here. They required some sort of sacrifice. And if you'd give money or you'd give good food, everything would be okay. They'd leave you alone. If not, if you stood up and said no, that's when they could trick you, burn your barn, do whatever. Now there's another thing called souling, where beggars would go begging for soul cakes, which was like a little square piece of bread with currants. Let's just say it's like raisin bread, basically. Where beggars would go to your house. They'd go knock on John and Susie's door, and they would promise them, we'll say prayers for your dead relatives if you'll give us soul cakes. And then Susie and John would agree and say, yes, say prayers for our dead relatives. Here's you a soul cake. A lot of people think that this was not a bad thing, that it was a way to help people eat, beggars to have food. But the premise of it's wrong. Just help them. You're not promising to say prayers for dead relatives. But the reason they did this is they believed that when somebody died, their souls were in limbo for a time. In other words, they were just sort of floating out there and wandering, like we don't know where to go. Are we going to heaven or where are we going? And they believed that you could literally still pray for these souls right after somebody had died. We know that that's false. So, trick or treat is one of the big customs, and there's much more to it. I've shortened this immensely. Number 2, bonfires. Bonfires were lit at the Halloween season. Of course, then it was the Feast of Samhain originally, to ward off evil spirits. You see that even now in movies, I don't know, vampires or something, they get light and then put it in their face. You know, we saw it in Lord of the Rings the other night with that spider. You know, they were putting the light in the spider's face because supposedly light made dark things back off. So bonfires were to ward off demons, but look what they were originally called. The word bonfire comes from the word bone fire. You can see that by looking at the word bond. You can look it up in a dictionary and it'll tell you this, most dictionaries. It was a bonfire because originally a bonfire was where they would take the bones of sacrificed animals and or humans and pile them up and burn them. That's what it was called. It was literal bones burning, a bonfire. Druid priests could predict, supposedly, future good or evil by the way the sacrifices died. So let's say they sacrificed a black cat, because they did a lot of times. So they sacrificed a black cat. By the way the cat died, they would watch it. Sometimes they'd put them in cages under oak trees, and they'd watch the animal die or the person die. And by the way it died, they could predict the future. They said, for good or evil, by the way the sacrifice died. The sacrifices supposedly were made to placate, to please the sun god. Oh, we're scared of him, so please do things we want. What we want is more sunshine. We want longer days. We want winter to be gone. Now you think about it. Before you start judging all the pagans, now they were wrong. But before you start judging them and say, well, those bunch of dumb, stupid people, you got calendars. You know things. They didn't. They didn't know. All they knew was every year it started getting really dark earlier about this time of year. And all of a sudden it started getting colder. And all the crops died. And we don't know what's causing this. But our pagan religion tells us that if we'll just sacrifice to this God, that everything will be okay. And he'll bring sunshine back. And he'll bring warmth back. And there'll come spring again. They didn't realize that that's just a cycle that our God set in motion. And it will always come back. There'll always be seed time and harvest. But they didn't know that. They were controlled by fear of these pagan gods. So please, we'll sacrifice anything if you'll just let winter be over and let sunshine come back. And then when it did come back, they thought, our sacrifices worked. It was just a vicious cycle of ignorance. They didn't know any better. Now, by 1600, the burning of humans ended.
Wait.
That made me drop my jaw, Meg, surely. 1600? Columbus had already sailed the ocean blue in 1492, and the Pilgrims were getting ready to come over here, y'all. They came in, 1621, something like that? That's your history. Thank you, Meg. Homeschool kids, we know this stuff. So, I wasn't homeschooled. By 1600, the burning of humans ended, but sometimes they would still burn an effigy. An effigy is not a real person, but something made to look like a person. So because it was considered now inhumane to burn a person, we'll just make a scarecrow looking thing that looks like a person and we'll burn that and pretend like it's a human. So they're getting away from the brutal sacrilege they used to do, but it's still not good. So we've gone over trick-or-treat and bonfires, or bonfires, but number 3, costumes. That's a big part of Halloween. Costumes were not just for fun and games. I like costumes. I'm not talking about Halloween. Does anybody like costume parties? Like,
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Masquerade ball.
Yes, like at 4-H Club. The other day we did a luau. We got to dress up and flowery stuff, and people had leis on. I like stuff. Remember Nostalgia Day at school? That's probably for some of us older ones. Remember Nostalgia Day? You dress up like the 50s. You wear poodle skirts and stuff. That's fun stuff. That is not what Halloween costumes are all about. It came from something way more sinister when you attach this to Halloween. It was a means of protection. Because if you're scared of demons at this time of year, and the veil is thin and it's dark and it's cold and you're scared of these things, if you dressed up like a demon, or you dressed up like a goblin or a ghoul or a witch or something scary, they'd leave you alone. Because they'd think you were one of theirs. Or either they'd be scared of you and they'd stay away if you dressed up like something like that. So dressing up in costumes would fool the demons and they'd leave you alone. Because you wouldn't be dressed up. You wouldn't be yourself. They wouldn't recognize you, so they would just go on their merry way. So costuming was fear-based here too. Do I think there's anything wrong with costume parties? I don't. I think they can be a lot of fun. Do I think that this was a bad route of Halloween? This was, 100%. Anybody else when you were a kid dress up like witches? I did. One year I dressed up kind of like a witch. You know, most of the time I was going to be a ball player. One year I was Joe Rudy of the Oakland A's. You know, I was always going to be like a football player. But one year I was a witch. We didn't know any better. We literally didn't know any better. And it all came from this. This is ancient, these roots of Halloween. Number 4, bobbing for apples. That seems really, really innocent. He's like, what? You're telling me that's wrong? Well, these days I wouldn't do it because I'm not putting my mouth in water where somebody else has had their saliva all in it. I can't believe we did that.
Not too long ago.
Yeah, not too long ago. My husband's a germaphobe. He's probably better.
I am not a germaphobe.
Yes, you are. So, you know, I'm not doing it. But what was the root of it? Fruit, especially apples, were very important to that Roman harvest goddess that I mentioned earlier, Pomona. So Romans would lay out apples and nuts for her. Kind of like, I don't know, people leave milk and cookies for Santa Claus or something. You know, for this goddess, you put out the apples and the nuts for her. So apple bobbing, apple peelings, and nut games were popular at this time of Halloween long ago because they could predict the future. Remember what we said? They believed that the veil between the natural world and the supernatural world was very, very thin, that you could predict your future by doing things. You could bite an apple, you know, bob for apples, and when you did, that meant you were going to have good fortune next year. If you could actually, and that was hard to do. Anybody ever bob for apples? Is it just me? 3 or 4 of us, you know, 5 of us, 6, okay, more of them. That was hard. You know, I remember trying, you know, and I just thought, well, this is all for fun. Well, no, back in these days, had I been able to get my teeth in one of those apples and come up, and everybody's going, look, she got one. That means good luck in the coming year. Now, one thing we used to do, and I remember at Miss Hawkins' Chicken Stew, my mama remembers Miss Hawkins in the neighborhood. We have a big old chicken stew for the neighbors, and I remember sometimes we'd have apples there, and it was such a fun thing, we thought, to peel the apple and then to throw it over our backs and turn around and see if it landed in the shape of a letter. Because supposedly, and yeah, this is in my lifetime, not ancient Druid practices, if it landed in like an S, that meant that was my future husband's first name. You know, was it Sam? Is it, oh, who can it be? I remember us doing that. Mama probably didn't even know we did it. Me, Connie Hawkins, and all of us, we would do that fun stuff. So even that had even carried on to modern day, sort of, kind of, with the same connotations it used to have, that you could peel an apple and the shape of the peel would predict your future, even your future spouse. The throwing a nut into the fire would foretell your future. If it burned really quickly, good luck was coming. If it exploded when it hit the fire, you better watch out because you got a bad year coming. Some would put stones, little rocks, in the ashes of the fire, and if you took them out too soon, it was bad luck. Or if you looked in the morning and brushed the ashes back and the rock was cracked, bad luck was coming your way. So people were using things of nature, apples, apple peelings, nuts in the fire, to predict the future, and that was never of God. It's still not of God. When we do that Bible study coming up, you're going to see that divination and prognostication, what's that word? Is that a real word? Prognostication. These things are not of God, and people are doing them all the time. If you're doing something to predict your future, you're looking at your horoscope or studying your sign and your stars, that's not of God. He said leave it alone, but Christians are doing it way too much. We should not even delve into that. Now, number 5. We've already got trick-or-treat, bonfires, costumes, bobbing for apples, and other fruit-related things. Number 5, witches were connected to Halloween. They still are. Witches convened to work their mischief. Exodus 22:18 tells us this, suffer not a witch to live. Now, I'm not telling you today, I know some witches. I know one for sure. I just saw her the other day. Her. She'll tell you she's not a Christian. There's only one I can think of for sure who's a witch. There's others I'm wondering. But I'm not telling you go out and kill them. That's Old Testament stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. So on the camera, we're not out to kill witches. But I'm telling you here that the Bible was stern about witchcraft. Even spirits of control and manipulation are forms of witchcraft. And you see that even in churches with controlling pastors or controlling elders or deacons. That's witchcraft. Now, Halloween is one of the 4 high Sabbaths for witches, especially in Europe. Witchcraft is way bigger in Europe than it is in the U.S., although it's growing in the U.S. But one of the 4 high Sabbaths, they did take the word that God gave us, the Sabbath. They took it for their counterfeit religion here. Of the 8 major annual witch festivals, Halloween is number 1, even now. So you can, I just studied them all yesterday and the day before, so I know all the festivals. There's one coming up. I didn't know this. I learned this yesterday. There's one coming up Saturday, September 21st. Is it Feast of Lammas? I don't know. Some witchcraft feast. It's one of the 8 holy days for the witches. And then the next one that's coming up is Halloween, and it's number 1. More so than the summer solstice, the winter solstice, Halloween is the biggie. I am really hot. Can somebody check that? Me too. Did anybody turn the air conditioner down?
No, but it was on it said it was 71 here. I figured it wouldn't get any colder than that, but it might have gotten hotter with more
It
people
may
in
just be
here.
my middle-aged state. I don't know. All right. Jamie laughed. All right. So, witchcraft, we're still on that one. When the witches convened at Halloween, or the Feast of Samhain, that later became known as Halloween, many attended the celebrations. Now here's the thing. When I say many attended the celebration, they'd often wear masks to hide their identity. Because a lot of times, it was your powerful people. It was your mayor of ye old city in England. You know, it was your mayor. It was your council people. And they didn't want you to know they were involved in the local coven that would meet out in the woods at Halloween, so they would wear masks a lot of times. That is just creepy. Does anybody remember Nathaniel Hawthorne in school? Abigail's like, yeah, a few years ago I made her read those stories. When he wrote those stories like Young Goodman Brown and some of the stories he wrote about witchcraft, that stuff's for real. They really did meet in the woods and disguise themselves. And we're not going to get too much into this, although there's not any little kids here. Witchcraft, they encouraged, especially at the Halloween season and all of their high Sabbaths, fertility. They have a lot of fertility rituals. There were a lot of bad sexual things going on at that time. Still are, in Satanism especially. That's why witches rode broomsticks and branches. People are like, well, what are they? It was a fertility symbol. It was a phallic symbol. Just go look it up. We're not going to get into that here and now, but that's exactly what it was. That's why they rode broomsticks and pranced around out in the woods in their coven meetings with broomsticks and branches. Women joined witchcraft covens in higher numbers than men. And if you think about it, it's on your paper here, because it was a way they could have power. Women had no power. They were property of husbands or dads at that time. There was no power. But when you could go join the local coven, you had power. They promised you power. Many people joined covens of witchcraft because they needed a release from their bleak, poverty-stricken, dull, drab lives. They needed release. Religion wasn't providing what they needed. You had a remnant of people who had a thriving relationship as far as with Christ and Christianity. That was always there. But in the Dark Ages, a lot of your religion was controlled by priests and people who wouldn't even let you read the Bible. You came to church and you'd hear them read, and it was in Latin. Before the Bible was even translated into English, you couldn't read it if you couldn't read Latin, if you weren't educated. So poorer people especially, they had no real participation in religion. They had to just do what the priest said, or the whatever you call a Protestant version of a priest. What do you call them in England?
They're priests.
Are they still Anglican priests? She's right, Anglican priests. You just did what they told you. So they wanted excitement. They wanted something to give them power. Join the local coven. All right, let's go to page 3. This This is number 6 as far as the different traditions and customs associated with Halloween. Animals such as black cats, bats, owls, and toads were important in witchcraft, Satanism, the occult. These were the more common animals that witches used as familiars. Now, familiar spirits, I'm going to teach about this more when I do that next Bible study on just practices of darkness and the occult. Familiar spirits are very real. I'm even very, very cautious and prayerful when somebody gives me something to take into my home, if it's somebody I don't trust. Because witches can 100% attach a familiar spirit by curses and spells to an object that you take in your house. And then you got it in your house, and you wonder, how does she know everything I'm doing? How in the world does she seem to know what I'm saying or what I'm doing? Because there can be a familiar spirit attached to an object or an animal. That's why they said witches had black cats, because black cats could be prayed over by a witch in their prayer, not God's prayer, to attach a familiar spirit to it, and then that cat would come roaming around your house and come in your house and go through and then go back to the witch, and that familiar demon is what it is. That demon could report to the witch what you were doing, what you were saying. That stuff's for real. Still happens today. So again, we'll get more into that with that next Bible study. Witches watched their animals to get secret knowledge and believed their pets could often be possessed by demons or familiar spirits. Some people believe that witches could turn into black cats. I don't know about all that. That was just one common belief long ago. Number 7, another custom is jack-o'-lanterns. They were carved and lit and put outside of homes. Now, in the early days, it was never a pumpkin. That's an American thing. It was not a pumpkin. In the old Celtic lands, it was normally a turnip or a beet. I thought, that's so little. How in the world, would you carve a little bitty turnip or a little bitty beet? But that's what they used back then. And some other things. They would carve them out to represent the souls of the dead, or goblins that had been freed from the dead. That's why they put faces on them, to represent a soul of a goblin or somebody freed from the dead. And you would carve the ugly, make the faces ugly. Today people are carving all kinds of, pretty stuff in pumpkins. But it used to be, when I was a kid, you wanted it to be like, these jagged teeth and these pointy little triangle-looking eyes in the pumpkin, because you wanted them to be scary. Because originally, these things were carved to fool demons and to ward off demons. You put that out on your porch, you put a light in it, and already the demons didn't like light, supposedly. So you put a light in it, and you carve this ugly face, and then you just go back inside and shut your door, and you know a demon probably's not going to mess with you. Because you got your jack-o'-lantern on the porch. And you've also got your treats out there in case he comes and he needs a treat. And you stay in your house and you think you're safe, and you're just biting your fingernails till October 31st is over. And then you know, okay, I'm safe again for another year. It was just fear-based. Some people carried these jack-o'-lanterns to light their way in the dark and ward off evil spirits. Think about it. If Alan's been out in the fields working, and then he's got to go take part of the crop over to Debbie and Blake's house, and it's nighttime, it's getting dark, and it's October 31st. If he was carrying one of those, walking through the woods, he was scaring off the demons. They weren't going to come near him. That was their belief, because he had that lighted, ugly-faced jack-o'-lantern as he walked through the woods. That's just an example. Why is it called Jack? Because Jack was a nickname for John, and John was the slang name for any man. Dear John letters. Or somebody who's found and you don't know who he is, what do you call him? John Doe. Because John was just a slang term for a man. So is Jack. Jack came from John. John F. Kennedy, what do we call him? Jack. Jack Kennedy. Jack of the Lantern was basically a damned soul. That's not a cuss word, Malachi, when you say it like that. It was a soul who could not find rest, could not go to heaven, was bound for hell. That's an old Irish legend. I looked that up to double check it yesterday. For real, it was an old Irish legend that there was somebody out there, Jack of the Lantern, who was a soul who could not find rest. He made some kind of deal with the devil that he would never have to go to hell, but he couldn't go to heaven because he made a deal with the devil, so he had to just roam the earth and find no peace. And he was called Jack of the Lantern. We'll talk in a minute about, I don't know if I mentioned pumpkins. Yeah, I did later. Number 8, another custom for Halloween is simply midnight. For the Druids, midnight was the sacred hour. We still call it the witching hour, you know. I don't, but it's known midnight is the witching hour. I can remember spending the night with friends in like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. You know, you have a pajama party. You know, you girls, I guess you boys didn't have them. We'd have pajama parties. Remember that? And back in the day, we couldn't wait till midnight. It was just, oh, if we could just stay up till midnight. Of course, the midnight special came on. Remember that? Wolfman Jack and all that. It's like you just couldn't wait till, well, look at that, Wolfman. You know, woo, midnight special. You're waiting for midnight. Oh, it's the witching hour. And then we'd watch Shock Theater. Remember that? Because, Susie does. Because,
way
way back. Because all that stuff came on late at night. Because it was spooky. And people, you wanted to be scared. Why do people want to be scared? I was thinking about how God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Christians are supposed to be far away from anything fearful. But why do so many Christians still we can't wait to get scared. Let's tell ghost stories. Oh, let's just sit around the fire and tell ghost stories. I'm not doing that. Do you think it's because I'm scared? Not at all. But why do you want to even dabble in things like that? Somebody said recently something about that the people who don't do Halloween cower in their houses. Well, that's false. There may be some who do. But the Christians I know who don't celebrate Halloween, they're not cowering in fear. We're not, I'll say this for me, I am not choosing to not celebrate Halloween because I'm scared. I'm choosing to not celebrate Halloween because I don't think it's pleasing to God to delve into anything that celebrates darkness and originated with devils and goblins and demons and fear. I wrote a column a few years back, and it'd do us all well to go read that column. If I could find it, I'd send it out to you all. I'll try to remember that. I wrote a column, statistically, what happens to your brain when you watch scary movies. Now, this is something I'll get into more when I do that next Bible study, but I will tell you that you watch scary movies, it affects your brain because your brain remembers. It creates a muscle memory in your body. It creates a memory in your brain that can trigger nightmares later in life. You maybe haven't watched a scary movie since you were 10, but you might be in your 40s and wonder why you're tormented by certain nightmares or stuff. It's proven that these can be traced back to the scary movies and the things we used to do to bring horror to ourselves and call it fun. I mean, did y'all go see Friday the 13th? I did. I went to see the movie Halloween. Who had Michael Myers? Was that Friday the 13th? Halloween. I went to see all this stuff. Mama didn't take me. I can't believe she let my aunt take me. My aunt took me. But I sat on the, not Mama's sister, but I sat on the edge of my chair, I wanted to be scared. And Friday the 13th, I'll just spoiler alert, he comes back up out of the water at the end. Is that him or is that Jason? Well, he comes back up out of the water. Which one's that, Alan? You know them all.
That was the first one.
There you go. And we wanted that. That's not of God. It's not of God to want to be scared. It's not of God to want to have fear. I told Malachi yesterday, he scared me. He hid. And he waited, and I walked out, and he was like, I was like, Malachi, don't do that to me. Because my friend in Florida, Peggy Menzel, she said that she teaches when she goes to churches, don't even scare people. Don't even play. Don't even hide behind something and jump out. We think that's so much fun. She said, you are eliciting fear, is that the right words? In somebody when you do that. And she said, that's not good. And I've never thought about it till Peggy taught us that. I don't jump out and scare my kids and stuff.
Or the invisibility challenge where parents keep tricking their kids and make them think they're invisible. It's awful.
I never have heard that.
It's a challenge that went around, and you have little kids in the video, they panic because the parent acts like they can't see them and they're in the same room, and the kids freak out.
That's not funny.
But I'm just saying, it's like social media really magnifies a lot of kind of really bad things. People do that with their pets. Like, it's just really mean.
It is mean. It's not. It's not gonna do anything good for that kid ever. Okay. there are a few of the things. There are 8 different things I listed as customs of Halloween, but there are more. But let's go to the next part. Why did the Catholics do what they did with pagan holidays? We've covered this already a little bit. The original goal, to give pagan holidays new meanings through compromise. 601 AD, Pope Gregory the Great, that wasn't Gregory the III, but 601 AD, Pope Gregory the Great is the one, I told you I read his edict, and it's very interesting. You should read it. It sounds like he's trying to do something really good, but I don't think it was good. And as you can see on your paper, before that, they had unsuccessfully tried to totally stamp out heathenism. And when they couldn't do it, they compromised. I don't think God compromises with evil. Ephesians 4:27. Neither give place to the devil. That's the King James Version. The NIV says, and do not give the devil a foothold. Don't give the devil any ground in your life. And you're not doing it from fear. You're doing it because it's God's way that you don't fraternize with darkness. Ephesians 5:11. KJV, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Here's the NIV. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Now that's strong language right there. The unfruitful works of darkness, the Bible tells us to expose them or reprove them. Call it out for what it is. It's not popular to call out works of darkness because the world gravitates toward that stuff. It makes you very unpopular. But who do you want to be popular with, the world or God? We have to do what God says. Now, one pagan said this. This is a modern pagan, not a witch, not a Satanist, but somebody who believes in paganism, said Christianity is nothing but a collection of recycled pagan superstitions. Now, I don't agree with that. This is just what the pagan world thought when looking at Christianity. Said they're just recycling pagan stuff and calling it Christian. Now, that gives us thought right there, cause for thought. Say, what is it in our lives that we're hanging on to that's very, very pagan and we're calling it good? You can't get rid of all paganism. What are you going to do Thursday? That's Thor's day. Friday, that's Frida or Freya's day. Wednesday, that's Woden's day. You're calling all the days of the week by pagan names. You're calling all the months, pretty much, the months of the year come from pagan gods. So this is coming to our culture. The same thing happened to the Jews. The Jews' months, the calendar of God, there are often 2 names for each month. One was God's original name for the month, and the other was once they were carried into captivity, they would use the Babylonian or whoever, or wherever they were carried, they'd use that name. So you can't get away from some of this stuff. But there is a lot that we can draw the line and get away from it. How did Halloween come to America? It wasn't here at first. The Puritans outlawed it. Now, I don't like a lot of what the Puritans did, but I do like this. They outlawed all pagan holidays when they came to America, but that didn't last. Now, Halloween was hugely brought to America by the Irish, and I love the Irish, and I am partly Irish, definitely, Scot-Irish. But the Irish immigrants loved Halloween. It's still a national holiday in Ireland now. Like here, it's not a national holiday. We consider it a holiday, but it's not national. In Ireland, it is. After the potato famine in Ireland, that's about the 1840s, after it drove many, many Irish immigrants to America, that's when Halloween took off in this country. In the 1800s, the tricks were more popular than they are now. I hope that doesn't come back, that the tricks become more popular. Goblins in, what do you call them? Quotation marks, that's it. Goblins in quotation marks would hide movable things. You know, Mandy goes outside tomorrow morning, the day after Halloween, she's going to water her flowers and they're gone. What? I don't have flower, I just have flower pots here. That kind of thing. That you'd go to somebody's house and stuff that could be moved, you go hide it. You'd put it in a different place. Little harmless tricks, they say. So homeowners in the 1800s learned to stand guard at night on Halloween night because they knew there was a possibility some of the local youth who didn't have anything come to your house and move something or do something. Now the pranks did become more harmful as time went by, so towns began planning special Halloween festivities. Why? Because all your 15-year-old boys like Malachi, not Malachi, he's a good kid, but all the other 15-year-old boys were just looking for something to do. It's Halloween. What can we do? Let's go to Jamie's house. I bet we did. Let's egg her house. Let's toilet paper Alan's house. Let's go do something, y'all. It's Halloween night. Let's do it. So towns started providing festivals to keep the young people busy, to keep them out of trouble. When I was a kid, does anybody remember the Halloween carnival at South Stokes? Few nods? That was big. I was too little most of the time and I couldn't go, but I think I might have gone once. I couldn't wait to go to the Halloween carnival at South Stokes in the gym, because there was all kinds of fun things to do, but that's why towns started doing it, to keep people out of trouble. There were parties, costume contests, parades. Let's cut down on pranks and have treats to replace the tricks. Pumpkins replaced turnips and beets as jack-o'-lanterns simply due to availability. We had more pumpkins in America than we had turnips and beets. So let's carve a pumpkin, we said. Halloween became more and more popular in the 1900s, and now we know it's a huge holiday. Let's keep going. Getting near the end here. What time is it? How much time we got here?
Been going for an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay.
8:12.
Oh, good. We'll finish. Could Halloween be a link to the occult? What does the word occult mean? It simply means hidden, secret, hidden. So, occult or hidden activity is at a high level in the U.S., especially at Halloween. That's for sure. I went to several different Wicca websites and pagan websites. I didn't go to any Satanism websites. I stayed away from those. But I found that they got all kinds of stuff playing. Now, it seems innocent. They say it's totally innocent. We're just celebrating the harvest. We're celebrating the end of the summer season as we go into fall. And I think a lot of people truly are trying to do that. You know, they really aren't trying to be evil. But is the evil taking place? 100%. You talk to any Christian who's come out of Satanism, and they'll tell you horrible stories of what happened at Halloween. There's a lady, oh, did Belinda, somebody sent me a vid. Katie, what was that lady's name? Vicky? Was it Vicky something? I'm telling y'all this in case you want to Google her.
Her first name was Vicky.
Vicky. She's from Great Britain.
Yeah.
She grew up in a Satanist home where there was ritual abuse, a lot of it sexual with children. And Halloween was a big time for that. And she's now trying to expose Satanism all through Great Britain. And she's running up against horrible things because a lot of your higher ups in government are involved, and they'll shut her down. As soon as she tries to say, but it's happening here and here, they'll shut her down because they can. But she's a powerful woman of God. Katie sent me a really good video by her. So this occult activity is huge at Halloween. Drugs, Satanism, necromancy. Does anybody know what necromancy is?
When you speak to spirits of the dead.
Exactly. You're talking to demons, and I don't think it's the real dead people.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't believe it's demons. Spiritism, divination, numerology. Now I put this next thing, even forms of yoga can be associated with the occult. That may be something we get into with that next Bible study. I have had a theory for years that Halloween desensitizes us to the occult. How could it do that? The next line tells you. Witches lose their repulsiveness because it's a cute little 5-year-old wearing a little witch costume, and she's so cute. Here, honey, let me give you some Reese's peanut butter cups. You know, I like good candy when I used to go trick-or-treating. It's like, don't give me them little, never mind.
Dots.
What?
Don't give them dots.
Dots are horrible.
I'm like, don't give me an apple. I want a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Don't give me a
But
pencil.
little kids, you know, in cute little goblin costumes, and you know, suddenly it loses what it's supposed to elicit in us. Like, oh, stay away from that. But suddenly little kids are dressed up like that, and it's so cute. And then you go to the Halloween carnival, and there's your preacher, and he's dressed up like, I'm trying to think of something he would, a preacher would, now, I mean, sometimes now they try to dress up like Bible characters, that's better. But you know, back in the day, what's that thing your daddy dressed up like one time? I made his costume.
Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice. That was it.
Tell what you
Beetlejuice.
were though.
Huh?
Tell what you
I
were.
was Glinda the Good Witch. Yes, this was a church party. This was a church party. And I was Glinda the Good Witch because I wanted to wear that big old pretty dress like she did and the little stuff she had on. I just wanted to look like that, you know. And he was Beetlejuice. And we were Holy Ghost filled, and we didn't know any better. Nobody had taught us. Our pastor tried to teach us. Our pastor was still alive in his 80s today. He was a wise man, Brother Bob. I honor him now more than I ever did back then. He would tell us, church, stay away from this stuff. And we'd go around behind his back and do it. We'd have Halloween parties with the song leaders and worship leaders and choir directors. We'd have a party over at so-and-so's house, and one man even dressed up like the pastor, and it was hilarious. He dressed up like Brother Bob. And we sneaked around and did that. And I'm like, what were we thinking? And I'm not even going to go into why I think it opened a lot of doors for a lot of us in that used to do that stuff. However, when you start seeing these things become fun, then suddenly they're not as evil, right? Witches and goblins and these things, they're not as scary because darkness is fun on Halloween night, right? It's fun. And behind that mask, you know, it's your neighbor. Behind that mask, it's your friend, it's your local nurse, your local school teacher behind the mask. So suddenly things that should make us turn away are fun. So I think it desensitizes us to the occult. Glinda the Good Witch. Well, witchcraft can't be that bad, right? Because she's so sweet. Glinda was so pretty. Are you a good witch or a bad witch? You know, she did her little thing. Oh, you know, come out, wherever you are. And everybody's like, oh, that's so sweet. Here comes the munchkins. And Glinda's so nice and good. And that bad witch, she's under the house. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Witch, oh witch, the wicked witch. Well, Glinda was a witch too. There's no good witch. There's no white magic. It's deception, people. It's deception. And Hollywood has played a role in it. Now, Wicca, which is the witchcraft organization, Wicca means wise woman. I forget what language it is, but that's what it means. They boasted a membership. Now, I couldn't find anything. I had to go back to 2008. That's 11 years ago. But 11 years ago, their membership was at least 342,000 in the U.S.
That's low. It's very popular in college campuses.
Really? Well, you went to Salem.
No, friends. I had a lot of friends at Salem and Winston-Salem State who claimed to be members of Wicca.
So it's way bigger than this,
Men,
I'm sure.
women, yeah.
Well, this was 08, so I'm sure it's way bigger now. And in Europe, it's way, way, way bigger than in the U.S., according to what I've read. Now, most members of Wicca claim to be a witch. So, what I saw in this was Newsweek magazine, y'all. This is not just some, crazy evangelistic Christian right-winger that's got a blog gonna tell you about witchcraft. This is Newsweek magazine from November 18th, 2018. It estimates that there are 1.5 million practicing witches in the U.S. 1.5 million. So not all of them are in Wicca. You don't have to be in Wicca to be a witch. I know a witch right now who claims to be white magic, whites, but she keeps herbs and stuff for spells, and she puts stuff together to cast spells on people, and she thinks that it can be a good thing, because most of it's a good thing, she says, but it's not. Anytime you're using a power that's not the power of God, it's always the devil. It is. Now, a 2008 survey found that in addition to the 342,000 members of Wicca, there were also 340,000 practicing pagans. Now again, that doesn't mean they're witches or Satanists. They just practice paganism. They like to look into pagan religions and study the gods and what they did. I had a lady who sat right here one afternoon. It was a 4-H club meeting, so none of y'all were here. We had to have a place to meet right quick, so we came here. She grew up in an independent Baptist church, and she felt that she saw some things go, this could happen in any church, I'm not picking on Independent Baptist, Pentecostal can be just as bad when you got controlling leadership, you know what I'm saying? She saw controlling leadership in such a way that she felt they tried to control her life, and she saw some really bad things happen. Was local, she doesn't live here anymore. But she told me that's why she left the church. She said, I have found way more peace in paganism than I ever did in the church. I saw hardness, I saw hypocrisy, I saw all that, and I don't need any of that. And so she had it on her Facebook as public record, public knowledge, she was into paganism. And she'd talk about it. It was very interesting to listen to. I apologized to her. I said, I am so sorry Christians treated you that way. Now, I love you. She and I were good friends, but I didn't agree with her religion, and she respected mine.
And a lot of people don't realize when they think of witch, they think of like creepy black cat, but a lot of people who claim to be witches or claim to be pagans or even Satanists, a lot of them are like really, I had a lot of friends who are into it, and they're really nice, kind of people. They don't realize what they're opening themselves up to. But people paint it as such like either, oh, that's not real, or it's such a scary thing that then they can't minister to those people because they either don't have love or they think it's no big deal what they're delving into.
You're right. You're exactly right. The people I know who delved into this kind of stuff are my friends, and they're very nice people. They really are. They're deceived. I don't think for a second they're sacrificing children behind closed doors. There are people doing that. I hope I don't know any of them. Actually, I hope I do, so I can find them and we can win them for the Lord. That's the key. Now, even the Good Housekeeping Book of Entertainment. You know, I mean, really, does anybody, I don't even own that book, but I'm sure it's a good book. The Good Housekeeping Book of Entertainment. It links Halloween to the occult. It says, and this is a quote from the book, orange, black, and red, the devil's colors, are the colors associated with Halloween. They plainly say it in Good Housekeeping.
Does that mean I shouldn't wear an orange shirt?
What?
Should we not wear orange, red, and black?
I think colors are beautiful. They're simply saying at Halloween those colors
No one
are
created
worn
colors
a lot.
but God.
Exactly.
That is the case of something that God created and people misappropriated.
Good point. Like, but yeah, there's many things he created that we can redeem.
Nobody created
Your
God.
orange shirt's great. All right.
All three of us.
Police departments report a great increase. I'm on the last page. If you don't know it, turn over to the final page. Police departments report a great increase in destructive behavior on October 31st. That's still going on from the 1800s even now. Ex-Satanists testify that throughout the year they primarily sacrifice just animals to get blood, because even the Satanists know that blood has power. Just like the blood of Jesus had power. That's the only blood that has power for us, but the demons will answer to blood as well. So some of the ex-Satanists say, we just dealt with animals through the year till Halloween. And then at Halloween, it's more powerful to use children. You will find more missing children right around this time. That is a statistical fact. I haven't tried it here, but I read online where some people said they were checking out some of the old things they thought were myths. Like they called the animal shelter and tried to say, could they adopt a black cat right around Halloween? And there are laws against it in many states. You cannot adopt a black cat near Halloween because they think you're going to kill it. They think you're going to take it and sacrifice it. So this stuff is real. There's laws against it, and police can tell you the stories here.
Well, here's a question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. If somebody doesn't adopt that black cat, what are they going to do to it?
I see what you're saying. They're going to euthanize it or whatever, but
But as long as they're not a shelter that only holds for a couple days and then euthanizes, that cat's probably safer. Waiting until after Halloween.
they'd be sacrificed.
Maybe tortured.
Torture with the blood sacrifice. I just don't even want to think about it. Now, I'm not going to go into this next part. I put this here for you to study at home if you would like. In preparation for the next Bible study, this stuff would be good. What about Halloween is biblically incorrect? And I'll just quickly read. It embodies at least 11 practices forbidden in Scripture. Enchantment, which is charms, incantations, magic practice. Witchcraft, which is sorcery, magic to deal with evil spirits. Number 3, sorcery. This is where you get power from evil spirits helping you, especially for divining the future. Number 4 is divination, which is fortune telling. Wizardry is number 5. That's magic and sorcery again. Number 6, necromancy. We've already said that's communicating with the dead. 7, the use of charms. That kind of goes with enchantments, number 1, putting a spell on people. Number 8, astrology. That uses the stars to tell the future. Soothsaying, foretelling events, which is you prophesy by a spirit other than God. Number 10, prognostication, which is foretelling using signs and symptoms. That would be the apple bobbing and that kind of thing, the nut in the fire. Or 11, magic. So a lot of these can all sort of be lumped together, and I've got biblical references there, which I'm going to save for the next Bible study. That's why I'm not calling them out for the camera. I'll video the next Bible study as well. So the next thing, what's a Christian to do? Here's the tricky part. I believe an individual must be led by the Spirit of God. If you celebrate Halloween, I love you and I'm not mad at you. And if you dress up your little kids and take them somewhere, I love you. Personally, I can't do it. A lot of people still do it because they're afraid their children are going to suffer. I got 4 kids here right now. Elijah's a dancer. He'd be here. My kids will tell you they didn't suffer. And if any kid wants to speak up and say something as we finish out here. One time, you were about 10 years old. She had a dance class in Kernersville. And it just happened to be that night on Halloween night. That month, that year, her dance class was maybe a Tuesday and it was Halloween. Her class was going to come dressed up. Well, I gave in because I didn't want her to be laughed at or scorned or mocked or picked on. So I gave in to the peer pressure and said, Megan, dress up like something, honey, and go. It'll be okay. And she refused. See, she wasn't bugging me. Mom, please let me dress up. Everybody else is going to be there. Laugh at me if I don't. She wasn't saying that. I was. Nobody wants their kids to feel like they're not getting what everybody else is getting. But you know what? Buy your kids some candy on November the 10th. And give them a bunch of candy. Buy them a great old big bag and give them a bunch of candy on November 10th or December the 3rd or February the 8th.
November
Or
1st, it all goes on sale.
It goes on
That's
sale.
when you buy the candy.
That's
for everybody.
Exactly. Have a church Disney costume party in February or something. You can do all this other stuff another night. So why you gotta do it?
Here's a question. All that Halloween candy's got like pictures of bats and jack-o'-lanterns on it. Should we even be doing that? You know what I mean?
It's a good question.
Our dentist would probably say don't eat it.
I will confess that I bought much Halloween candy after the fact when it's on sale. I've done that. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. What'd you say? Well, we shouldn't eat candy anyway.
And of course,
We'll
Reese's-
go in to eat. WWB.
Reese's comes out with the shapes around the holidays. The shapes are better than the regular peanut butter cups. Such temptation.
It really is. Thank you, Alan, for this. What'd you say?
They usually don't look like what they say on the pack.
This is true. Not quite as
It's just a
appetizing.
look.
Yeah.
But they got more
Like
peanut
little
butter in them.
Little Reese's. Thank you, Alan. Now I'm hungry. They do.
They do.
My kids will tell you, I don't think Malachi's ever been trick-or-treating. One time in
One time,
2010,
yes,
you went to St. Mark to a trunk-or-treat. I'll let you go to that.
That's-
I remember
oh,
that.
yeah.
I think that's the only time you ever went.
I trust
They-
it's fine.
They've not suffered. They don't care. They just, so if you're looking at it like, my kid's gonna suffer. No. Marshall, I'm gonna use this because it was on my Facebook page as public record. Marshall Jones, that's not her name now, is it? Brown, used to be the East Oaks Outreach Director. Marshall said God convicted her in the 90s about Halloween. She would still let her kids sometimes go to church festivals and dress up like Bible characters or something, but she said there was one Halloween night, I forget what it was, that they didn't have anything to do. So she said she and her husband and her 2 little girls just went out. I think they went to skating or bowling, and then they went to Toys R Us, and the kids just looked around at toys. She said it's one of the most memorable nights of their life. And it was Halloween night, and her kids weren't out doing what everybody was doing. It was a family night. And she said she'll never forget how pleasant that was. In other words, your kids don't have to suffer just because you don't let them dress up and go do this stuff. However, here's the key. If you or I decide not to celebrate Halloween, we've got to be loving to those who do.
Do
And
you?
Paul, what?
Do you?
Yes, you certainly do. That doesn't mean that you don't say, I don't think we should do it, but I love you anyway. You probably do stuff I don't agree with doing. And I probably do stuff you don't agree with doing. But I'm still gonna love you.
You just said it earlier, suffer not a witch to live, or they not all
My goodness.
fakes and witchcraft and stuff.
Video, ignore him. He's back there on the back
I'm
row.
not.
That's why he's on the back row.
Yeah.
Backseat
I
driver.
will give you examples for what
They
you
also
said.
said that you should stone your rebellious children in the Old Testament. So are you going to go stone Malachi?
Yikes, I wouldn't have any left. They've all been rebellious at some
There
time
was
or
some
another.
pretty hardcore Old Testament stuff that we would
Exactly.
not say.
Now, New Testament, right here it is. Paul went to Mars Hill. That was in Athens, Greece, and they were pagan as they could be. He went and talked to them and hung out with them. He did not focus on calling out what they were doing wrong. He simply introduced them to the one true God. And that made all the difference. They ended up burning a lot of their books, witchcraft books and sorcery books, because he introduced them to the one true God. The problem here that we're talking about tonight is we're talking about what must Christians do. We're talking that Christians are the ones. You know, when you're talking about the pagans or the heathens out there, it doesn't do any good to point your finger and tell them what they're doing wrong. Introduce them to God. Just introduce them to God. But with Christians, we already know God. So we got to talk about this stuff. Now, another example, Daniel. In the Old Testament, Daniel was in exile among the heathen. They operated in the occult arts all around him every day. He simply demonstrated his faith in God. Just read the whole book of Daniel and you'll see how he did that. And they saw that his God was God. Now let's look at some scripture to end it. Romans 12:2. Be not conformed to this world. I'm going to say that again. Be not conformed to this world. There's going to be a lot of things the world does that we as Christians can't partake in. We can't be part of it. The world loves Halloween. Did you know that it is now the second most popular holiday right behind Christmas? It's topped Easter. It's topped Thanksgiving, 4th of July. Only 8% of pastors in a survey sent out to many, many thousands of pastors, only 8% teach against Halloween totally. Some teach against Halloween somewhat, but say we can still have Bible character costume parties and festivals and stuff. So there's varying degrees of what pastors do, but only 8% in this country teach against it totally. Total spending on Halloween. Look how it changed. 2009, this is U.S., $4.7 billion spent on Halloween. That's costumes, candy, decorations, all that. 2016, $8.4 billion. Look how much it went up. Again, 2009, it was $4.7 billion. 2016, that's just 7 years later, it's $8.4 billion. It didn't double, but it came close to doubling. 70% of Americans say they participate in Halloween in some way. That money's huge. I saw people decorating their yards with Halloween stuff a month and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's big. When I was a kid, I don't remember people decorating for Halloween. We decorated at Christmas. What else do we decorate? Maybe just Christmas? That's about it. Now, Halloween is huge. We have to examine why. We really, I think, need to pray as Christians to say, why is this holiday, why has it passed Thanksgiving or Resurrection Day? How has this one taken control? The church has repackaged Halloween with trunk or treat, harvest festivals, etc.
Which comes out of the budget of the church. You're not
Seriously?
gonna- Most of them do trunk or treat, but
Yeah, I mean, they
comes
got
out of the budget of the church.
I guess I thought people just brought their own candy and I
Some
didn't.
of them do. The church has to pay for something.
Yeah.
I mean,
I never thought about that before.
marketing or their own decorations.
That's very interesting. And as we finish these, I want to open up the floor for those who don't have to leave and get in bed for jobs or whatever to talk about this, always in love. 1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from all appearance of evil. Y'all, this ain't nothing you're playing with, the Holy Ghost. You don't play. We're not playing with this stuff. This is serious business. Abstain from all appearance of evil. 1 John 1:5, God is light, And in him is no darkness at all. Not in God, none. 2 Corinthians 6:14 through 15 tells us not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. People think that's talking about marriage. You can take it for marriage, but it's talking about anything. Again, that's not telling you that you can't talk to unbelievers. You got to win them to the Lord. You got to love them and win them to the Lord. But yoked is a whole different thing. That's being in covenant or agreement with unbelievers, and we have no place to do that as Christians. Should we be yoked with the world and their continuation of a pagan practice? For me personally, my answer is in the same chapter, 2 Corinthians 6, but let's go down to verse 17. Wherefore come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. I want to be received of the Lord. I want him to hear my prayers, answer my prayers, move with his favor upon me. If I want him to receive me, I can't be yoked with the world. I have to be, I'm not separate enough. I know that. I am not separate enough from the world, but more and more, he's weaning me from the things of the world, and I'm not there yet. But by the Holy Ghost leading, I want to get there. Be ye separate. Acts 19:19. Many of them also which used curious arts brought their books together and burned them before all men. The people who did this had a lot of money in those books, because books were precious back then, precious. And they burned them. I've had burnings before. My kids will remember all the stuff we got rid of. Oh my goodness, we got rid of Disney movie, all kinds of stuff one time. Just tossed it, you know. And now, trust me, I was like, couldn't I sell that? Should I take it to Goodwill? I was like, no, get rid of some of that stuff. I'm not saying all Disney. There was some I knew I couldn't have in my house. In 2 Kings 17:15, the Israelites, here's the exact quote from the Bible, went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do like them. God's way was always, don't do like the heathen. Many people will argue that Halloween is all for fun and the devil's not in it. C.S. Lewis wrote, Satan's most deceptive tactic is to convince people he doesn't exist. Simple as that. If you can convince people that the devil's not real, all this stuff's not real, that's the devil's biggest tool, to deceive us this way. The opposite of asking what's wrong with something is to ask yourself, well, what's right about it? So if you've got to ask yourself, well, what's wrong with Halloween? Or what's wrong with something else I'm doing? Well, then turn it around and say, well, what's right about it? What's right with it? And then the final scripture, 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. Now, that's all I got, and that's a very, I know it seemed long maybe, but it's brief. There's so much more you can say about this. But I want to hear what you have to say. Oh.
Do you want me to keep the video?
Yeah, keep it going. If I have to edit it out, I'll just take it out. So, what do you have to say? And if you want to stand up right now and argue and say, but Leslie, we should spread the love of God, we should have harvest festivals at church, I'm not going to be mad at you. Maybe you got a point. Right now I don't see it, but maybe you do. I don't know.
I think part of it comes back to our biblical illiteracy. Like, the modern church doesn't realize that there actually were celebrations that God had instituted. Like, we celebrate here, like Sukkot has become like our new favorite church thing.
Yes.
But it were things that symbolize stories in the Bible that are part of our heritage now, even though we weren't born as Jews. It's part of our heritage, but the modern church world has no concept of holidays that aren't based on pagan traditions. All we know is even church holidays that were based on pagan traditions, because I can't even think of, Lent is not necessarily, but it can be tied up with pagan observances, but every other one has pagan roots.
Pretty much. Now, Resurrection Day, that's my favorite holiday of the year. As far as, I love Sukkot and all that, but I love Resurrection Day. I don't like to call it Easter because that is definitely a pagan term. But there's a lot of pagan stuff we do with Easter. I do a teaching on that. I haven't done it in years. I do a teaching on Christmas. That's the one nobody wants to hear. Some people will be okay with Halloween, but you start getting into Christmas, people don't want to hear it. Christmas has a whole lot of pagan stuff. But as Megan was saying sorry y'all, I'm looking for a bottle of water. As you were saying the other day, Megan, something about at least at Christmas, people acknowledge.
Well, I don't think most average people understand like any historical roots to Christmas. All they know is it's a celebration of Jesus' birth. That's wonderful. Halloween, like now you can say fun is one of the big things. Fun and mischief and spooky. But there's nothing Christian about spooky. At least you can argue that, Christmas, which I do happen on Christmas, is celebration of light and hope and
Right.
Jesus' birth. Even if it was
Even if it
was
wasn't really
a
born then,
repurposed
right.
sort of holiday. But I mean, there's no way to extract the spooky aspect of Halloween.
I've heard people say, let's try to redeem Halloween, but as I started out saying tonight, how can you redeem something that was never his? You can't, there's no redemption for something that was never his. Now, every day we should celebrate as unto the Lord. So I believe you can do great things on October 31st. I'm not going to hide in my house. If it's warm enough, I'm going to be under that tent. Like we did last year. We played music and worshiped. It was good.
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to don't do anything that violates your conscience toward the Lord, because Paul talks about that extensively. If it violates your conscience, don't do it. I participated in a Halloween party like maybe 6 years ago. It's the only one I'd ever participated in as an adult, and I felt like my conscience was violated because I knew that it was something that I didn't sit well within my spirit. So it was like, put something between me and God. If it's going to put something between you and God in your heart, then I would say don't do it.
Gotcha.
But it might not be the same for somebody else, and God may be working on them a different way or whatever. I don't know. But if it violates your conscience, then
I think that's a good way to put it. Anybody else? You got something to say or an experience you've had?
Oh, it's interesting you say experience you've had. Halloween was like back in my younger days doing drugs and stuff. One Halloween, I don't remember the year, but there was a blue moon on Halloween. Like the second full moon of the
Yes,
month.
I do.
And it fell on Halloween, and it was I think it was a Friday night, Saturday, so it was great, because that was the day you could go out and party and stuff. And we went to a concert, Two Skinny J's concert out in Winston at the old place Ziggy's out there by the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And it was, they had a big costume contest and stuff, and that night it was like supreme deja vu. I had a dream of that night prior to the night, and it was like when the feeling hit me, it was like so crazy, and it was just a weird experience. And it was, of course, like premonitions from demons or whatever, the stuff I was doing, LSD and smoking dope, and it was I had tapped into something
Right.
through all that.
Exactly
and
right.
Yeah, it was
You
freaky.
opened a door through that drug use, and then on that night it was even more enhanced.
It was freaky, and there was many times that I had dreams about stuff, and that exact situation, happened. And when it hits you that you had dreamed it, it's like, it's a weird feeling, man. But it wasn't of God, of course.
Right. I mean, God can give you dreams, but what he's talking about was not of God.
Yeah, that was not of God at all. And there was one guy that was dressed up that I can still see him today. He was dressed up as this old man. And in the dream, when it hit me that I had a dream about it, I specifically remember him. And when he walked past me and looked in my eyes, he was dressed up. You couldn't tell who he was or anything. But when I looked into his eyes, it was like something looking out at me, man. I was creeped out by that.
Probably was something looking out at you. No doubt.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or?
In Mexico, they do celebrate, Dia de los Muertos or something like that, and it is we stopped at some of the cemeteries, and they had, it was everything, you know, the cemetery was big, was made of big, was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then there were still, like, lots of flowers and things, like, there was, they were telling us, you know, they would bring like wine and cakes and things, they make a big deal about it, and then the next day go to church, you know.
Right. We remember reading about that in the Trixie Belden book, Dia de los Muertos. when
Day
they
of
were-
the Dead is super popular
Yes.
now with hipsters especially,
Yeah,
who have absolutely no tie to Hispanic culture.
yeah, they
It's
just
like,
picked it up.
They just do it.
Well, the pagan, people who consider themselves pagans are going to different cultures and picking
Right.
up whatever they did to their pagan gods or whatever, but like she said, they would do all that and then go to church the next day.
And then I think it was like, I'm not for sure or whatever, but it's like that, where they go to the cemeteries and they do that because it's the one day, like I was saying here, you know, that it's the, you know,
The veil's thin,
the veil's back.
you can
But
communicate.
they also go through the streets, and I don't know if that's a separate day, they go throughout the streets and they're dressed and celebrating, and they're in the costumes and things, and that's what you were talking about, what was it, when they went to the conversion or something?
Yeah, yeah,
But that, I mean, that's what I was seeing, it's like, wow, sounds like what, you know, what was happening there, or what is happening there.
yeah. And becoming bigger, like she's saying with the hipsters picking it up.
They just made the kids movie about it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I think I
forgot
saw a
the-
trailer for that. What was that?
Coco.
That was
Coco. Yeah.
Or was it the
Really
other one? No, there was
creepy.
another one.
No,
Dora.
Coco's the one I'm.
Coco was the guitar player.
Yeah,
He did-
that's
he-
Oh, was that it?
Yeah, but
There's
he's-
a second one.
There was another.
There's a
There
second
was
one.
one before that even.
Yeah, there's one before Coco about that too, but I don't
Really?
remember.
You see how you weave this stuff into the kids and it just becomes just, it is where it starts.
Well, the witches and Satanists, they adhere to the same things, you know, train a child up and they won't depart from those ways.
It works both ways, doesn't it? I never thought about that. Train up a child the wrong way and that works
And
too.
they won't depart unless, of course,
Bless
the
the
Holy
Lord.
Spirit gets a hold of them.
But I think you also have like a big wave, like in today's culture of being accepting of everything, like accept your truth and your path, you know, and like all different traditions and practices. You have that, you know, pretty big in our culture right now, and so, you know, you have all these movies and all these things coming out. Well, this is what I celebrate. Let me, you know, educate you, and so just kind of like everything's okay, and it's not.
Everything's not okay. And Christians who really live according to the word are going to become more and more marginalized. There's going to be more and more of a very not discreet, distinct line in the sand. More and more. What does the Bible say? We're going to be persecuted for His name's sake.
But when you have leadership, pastors and people who walk that line, it's okay. That the people who know the truth are a minority.
Right.
And a lot of times the minority's not speaking up.
Right.
And so when you're sitting in a church Sunday after Sunday and the preacher's giving you the half truth of it, not the whole truth, or they don't even have the whole truth themselves to steer you from that or feed you to know the right and wrong of it,
Right.
you know. So those who do know, that minority, and like you said, you have to do it with love.
Yes.
And the reason people don't come to these is they don't want to feel judged.
Right.
Because they do it.
Right.
Or they've been taught it's okay. I have heard so many people say, it's the way I was taught.
Right.
And that doesn't make it right
Mhm.
because you were taught that way.
But I'll tell you something that can make a big difference is being baptized in the Spirit of God. Can make a difference. However, I just told you the stories about how all of us years ago baptized in the Holy Ghost were dressing up like Linda the Good Witch and doing all that kind of stuff because we thought it was a lot of fun, you know. But I will say that back in that day, we weren't flowing in the Holy Ghost the way I know that these people are now. The ones who are still alive, a lot of them have gone on now, but No, it's a big difference. So people flowing in the Holy Ghost. So you got a lot of churches that won't teach the baptism of the Holy Ghost. Tend to be the ones that don't believe in women preachers or the dress thing. When you got that, really, wow, what a strike against you.
Well, even though,
What she said was, it's freeing, like what she's talking about walking in. But when you talk about even subjects like this, the whole Halloweeny kind of dark occult thing, people think that if you don't celebrate that kind of stuff, you're in bondage.
yes.
But see, to me, it's the other way around. I don't feel in any
Free
kind of
from
bondage.
it. It
I'm-
doesn't matter.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
You're free from it.
I started thinking today about Jesus. Now, Jesus was living in a society where Rome ruled. You know, they'd taken over Israel, basically, and they ruled. Can you imagine all the Roman festivals? Let's say they had Fernalia and the Feast of Pomona. What if they had all that stuff going on? Can you imagine Jesus doing all that? Hanging out at the Roman parties, celebrating the goddess Pomona and the goddess Fernalia. Can you imagine Jesus doing that? And you know the early Romans had many, many festivals even after Jesus had already gone back up to heaven. If you think about it, can you imagine Paul and Peter and John and all of them? Can you imagine them saying, using their liberty, that freedom you're talking about? Because Paul said, I got freedom, I got liberty. Can you imagine them using that liberty to go celebrate with the pagans? They wouldn't have done that. Especially when you're Holy Ghost filled, when you go around anything like that, you get a sense, you know, like Spider-Man's got his Spidey sense, you know, we got
His
the Holy
sixth
Ghost
sense.
sense.
I think the danger with things like Halloween, you know, a lot of people wanting to like clean it up in order to bring people in. I think the danger is when you bring people in by the flesh, you have to keep them by the flesh.
Absolutely.
So if you bring them in by having fleshly fun, not to say you can't have fun in church,
Sure.
but when you bring them in by the flesh, then often that's how you have to keep them and entertain them. I think most people are looking for a sense of community and power and something living, but unfortunately a lot of churches haven't offered that. And so they take on worldly practices to get people in, but then you have to keep people that way.
Absolutely. That's what the Catholics did. Absolute same
That's
thing
the
the Catholics
danger.
were doing in 601 AD or earlier.
When you do a holiday, like you symbolically participate in things that actually meant something. Like I
Right.
always struggle with like the books I read, the stories. They're written by imperfect people who included mythology and magic sometimes, and it's like, what can I read or what shouldn't I read, whatever. When you're participating in a holiday, you are carrying out a practice, even if you're not doing it knowingly. It's a ritual. That's what it is. So you are symbolizing. You are actively symbolizing and taking part in something. It's not like you're just like, I don't know, reading a Greek mythology story or whatever. You're actually taking part in something.
Right. You are participating
You're
actively.
celebrating it out in the world. You're putting feet to something, which I don't think is something that we should, I guess.
I think a lot of people they're looking for something alive, something that makes them feel something. That's why they're drawn to things that scare them, something that it, like sparks something inside of you, and suddenly you feel this life that you didn't have before. And unfortunately, a lot of churches haven't offered that, but they're looking for something that makes them feel, because they're anxious, they're depressed, they're bored with their life, they don't have the exciting life, you know, that they wish they had, and they're looking to feel something. And unfortunately, a lot of churches haven't offered that kind of life and power. You know, when people start getting miraculously healed and legs growing out, people raising from the dead, and church isn't boring anymore. You know,
Right.
Chris Estrada has said a lot of the things along those lines with why a lot of young people have left the church. But I think that's why some people, I think there are many different motives, but I think some people are drawn to those kind of things because it sparks something inside of them. You know,
That's
They
why
feel
entertainment
something.
works so well.
Yes. Right. In the church world,
Yes,
big time.
That's why it works so well. It gives them that feeling
Yeah.
they're looking for, and they mistake that entertainment for worship.
Right.
And see, true worship brings in the things you're talking about, healing and deliverance and stuff, the power of God. But what they're getting is artificial, comforting the flesh entertainment.
Right. It's feeding the soul, but
Yeah.
remember, your soul's not your spirit.
Right.
We we say that term soul wrongly sometimes. You and I've talked a lot about a lot of what goes on in churches is soulish.
Yes.
And we call it spiritual, but it's soulish. You know, sometimes you get that bass thumping and you get that drive going. Dum, 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 dum. Sometimes the Holy Ghost can definitely move in that.
Right.
Yes. Sometimes it's just getting your emotions hyped up and it's soulish. What'd you say?
No,
Oh, I was gonna say something anyway. No.
But when I was reading your notes of like some of the old pagan practices, it struck me that there's gotta be demonic roots behind like, I don't know, covering yourself in sheets or like whatever, like some of the stuff you were saying, like it was literally, I was reading a KKK manual. Cause you're like, they parade.
I thought the same
Cause
thing.
you're like,
I
they
do too.
parade in white
Yeah.
robes and you said they catered to poverty-stricken people. I mean, like, I was like, it was like a manual for the KKK. I was
And
like,
the
oh my
mayors
God.
and the council were dressed up with the hood so you wouldn't know that.
And they meet out in the
Wow.
woods, and I was like, you know
Yeah,
what?
and they cover.
Anything that is
Yes.
secret, there's got to be a demonic root to it. There's like something. I don't know. I'm sitting there thinking, wait a second, like this stuff still goes on, but in different ways that we don't think of as witchcraft.
That's good.
Scotch, Irish, that's still the South
Right.
predominantly.
You're right. That's
So
where
there
they
might even
settled
be
was the
pagan
South.
roots to, like it. Yes, it's racism. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It is racism.
Yes.
But the ways that we carry it out harkens back to an even older time. You know what I mean? Like
Demonic,
so
ancient,
you're reading this going,
druid type
hold on.
thing.
And if you think of, think about it also, because you talked a lot about, you know, things that people did out of fear. In some ways with Halloween, that's what motivates people to celebrate it. Fear
Right.
of man.
Right.
They wanna fit in, they don't wanna be talked about, they don't want, you know, whatever. So in some ways, even in modern times, fear is still the motive, not only sparking fear, but also, you know, fear of man is still a motive behind Halloween, even though most people have no idea where any of this stuff came from and that it was fear of demons or the darkness or the dead or whatever. Fear is still a motive, you know, not only with sparking
See
fear
that,
with people,
yeah.
but also why they're afraid to not celebrate Halloween.
That's
They're
a very
still
good
living
point.
in bondage to fear. It's just
It used
not-
to be fear that the demons would get you. Now it's fear that
fear of man.
what will everybody think if I don't?
So
if my
it's
kid
still a
doesn't, or-
holiday that often has a bondage of fear for different reasons.
I totally see that. The fear I operated in when I wanted you to dress up that night when you were 10 and you wouldn't. Fear of man, for me.
and my friends didn't care. I think as parents also, there are kids that are bullies, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's a bigger deal to the parents than the kids because they live vicariously through their children. Let's be honest. My friends were just like, you're not dressing up? Okay, whatever. And we dance. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I bet my kids would have rather me say, hey, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese and eat
Yes.
pizza and play skee-ball and go trick-or-treating anyway.
Let's go now. Let's go to Chuck E. Cheese.
Right.
Jeez.
About to close.
I do that, Chuck.
We shouldn't be shocked that trick or treating has been around for well over 2,000 years, you know, because Satan has been on earth or given basically free reign for since the beginning, you know what I mean? I mean, he was cast down and
Prince of the power of the air.
yes.
You know, when we were, and I'm not 2,000 years old. But, when we were kids, you know, your daddy didn't even know what trick-or-treating was, he said, because they never went trick-or-treating, and we did not as children. We just did not do that.
I took a poll last year after you and Daddy told me that. I took a poll on Facebook and found out from some of the older people, Miss Glenna Hicks, our old teacher, you know, she's gone now, but last year she was alive. And she messaged me and said, we didn't really know what trick-or-treating was. She said when she hit maybe high school, people started really trick-or-treating. So it's not, for us, the norm. It's what?
So it's coming recent?
Well, it's been going on like we talked, like he said 2,000 years, but as far as, you know, in this area especially, it wasn't common.
Area.
You know, if it was for us,
I
it was
think
for me when I was
consumerism
little.
plays a big role in it. I mean,
Yes.
marketing and
Greed.
consumerism, selling. I mean, honestly, why we have holidays like Mother's Day, mostly to sell Hallmark cards. Let's be honest. They keep creating new holidays to sell more cards. There's a reason why that so much more money being spent, so much more money being put into ads, because they realize it sells and it's out in front of you. It's in your,
With
Walmart
social media
things,
too, it's out in front of you all the time.
I think that has a lot to do with the decorating you were just talking about. Because now in social media, you want to put a picture of everything. And so
Sure.
people decorate
Right.
for everything now. Like
Yes, they do.
almost everything.
They do. Yes. And I like decorating for stuff, but I'm not decorating for Halloween, that's for sure. And you're right, it's a big deal because you can take pictures of all of it. Here's the pumpkin we carved, here's her costume. It's just out there now. I mean, y'all can't see my 1972 picture of me as Joe Rudy for the Oakland A's unless Mama goes to her photo album. But now, you can see every kid's costume every year and every kid's candy haul every year, and there's pros and cons to that social media. And the love of money is the root of all evil. Let's face it, it is. Money, 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 greed.
This has truly been, every time I'm here, I learn something.
Me too.
I've been in church all my life. It's something.
It was just, the stuff wasn't taught sometimes long
No, it
ago
wasn't.
like this.
I
It
love
didn't have to
everybody.
be, I don't know.
See you.
Love you, Mama. Let's see Mark's Friday. I'll talk to you more at some point. Okay.
The old saying, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance ain't gonna be an excuse when you're standing in front of God answering for all that you did. I didn't know. Well, why did you just go along with it? I don't know what questions God will ask us when that day comes or whatever, but because I didn't know ain't gonna be a reason that He's gonna be, oh, okay, you didn't know. But the knowledge was out there.
You're right. When you said that, for some reason, I was thinking about taking my kids trick or treating, talking about the knowledge. I had an inkling, because I was Holy Ghost filled when I was 19. And I didn't have her till I was like 25. But I can remember the excitement on Halloween as it was getting closer to dark and knowing I was getting ready to take her trick or treating. So I don't want you to think that just because I teach this now and I don't believe in it now, that I don't know what, if I don't know who, I literally don't know who in here celebrates and who doesn't. But if you still feel that excitement about it, I totally understand. I really do. I used to feel that excitement. I couldn't hardly wait till it got dark so I could take her from door to door and in her cute little clown costume one year. But I can promise you that now I feel the same joy not doing it. So it's not like I really even gave up anything, if that makes sense.
Well, I think it goes back to relationship. The closer we get to Him, the less desire we have for things of the world, for the food and candy and treats and all that stuff that's marketed so heavily, the consumerism that's tied to it, and all of the fun and games. The closer you get to Him, it's not a harsh or, oh my gosh, I'm just having to sacrifice this or what. You just don't care for it. The closer that you get to Him.
And with the
I think
knowledge,
it gets
like
closer.
the teaching we received tonight, that knowledge makes you think twice now.
Right,
Where you didn't consider it before, oh, it's just Halloween.
right,
Well, now we think about it a little bit differently now,
right,
That's
right. Yes. To whom much is given,
Right.
much is
But
required.
once you know, you are accountable for
Right.
what you know.
Yeah.
I think it's good that it's not just because, in talking about this tonight and Halloween coming up, but it's because I feel like God is calling us to purity.
Yes. He always has been, but the church has been so far in a dark ages, but she's right. Now there's this renewed call, and it's an urging of purity and being separate. I'm not separate enough. I'm telling you flat out, I'm not. Send the fire.
Spirit is the key. Spirit is one of the biggest keys, because the more that we Spirit and give less opportunity to the flesh, the more that He's gonna show us, or our eyes are gonna be open to what is of Him and what is not of Him, what is light and what is dark. The less opportunities we give to feed our flesh. You know, we're all guilty of that in different ways, you know, of feeding our flesh. But I think the Spirit is the key. The more that we walk in the Spirit, you know, it's just gonna happen. He's just gonna show us. It's just gonna be revealed to us. We'll see clearly what is real and what is not, or what is light and what is dark. We won't even have to worry about it or think about it. If we're flowing in Him, it's just gonna be revealed to us.
When we had the church Halloween party that year, the Glenda the Good Witch, Beetlejuice, I believe that's the only one we ever had, because again, our pastor didn't agree with Halloween. We did sneak around at people's houses, I told you, but one we had at the church. But sometimes when it's something you really want to do, you quench the Spirit. You do squelch, you know, the Spirit in your life. You know you're full of the Holy Ghost, and you know you probably shouldn't, but you really want to do it. So you just stifle it there for that little bit of time, just that one night. I'll never forget that night we did that party. I worked all day on those costumes. We had some new converts in our church, freshly full of the Holy Ghost, and they were on fire because it was new to them. They had just been baptized in the Holy Ghost, the Whaleys. It was John Whaley and all them girls. They walked into that Halloween party dressed as Mary and Joseph and, you know, Peter and John, and dressed up like people like that. And the rest of us were Beetlejuice and Glenda the Good Witch and Cruella de Vil and all these characters. I can remember the embarrassment when they walked in. I said, here are these people newly set on fire by the Holy Ghost and moving in the Spirit of that fresh fire that they've just received from God. And here's the rest of us that ought to know better. I remember that shame. I felt shame. But they were flowing so in, you know, that beauty of being baptized in the Holy Ghost. And the rest of us are sort of squelching it, really. And they looked disappointed, you know, when they walked in and saw all of us. They looked puzzled, like, oh, really?
I think, I was raised not celebrating it, like, ever.
I didn't know that. You were too. Okay.
Yeah, but, always, I don't know at what point my mom, we never, ever did it. And my parents were pretty young Christians when we were born. But I've been in churches and like evangelism based, like, ideas of things to do on Halloween. And I feel like that's a lot of the idea of the trunk or treat or things like that. Sometimes the idea behind it has been evangelism.
Right.
And so I guess it goes back to what Meg was saying as your conscience, because there's definitely a point of like evangelizing people in darkness, but I think that it's like, as far as the trunk or treat stuff goes, I'm not sure if that's the right way. Any place where Jesus is being exalted is good, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, the trunk or treat?
When it's,
Or
but
what?
it's what the whole idea is, like they're doing it to reach out to the community or evangelism based, even though it's a Halloween.
Right.
Like, I feel like that's a lot of the thought that they come with.
Oh, definitely. Because I've been part of, like I said, I was part of a trunk or treat when he was younger. And I remember it was to evangelize and to be kind to children.
Yeah.
You know, and to give children a safer alternative than what they might find on the streets. And I think there's merit to that. You know, I'm not against that thought of it, that side of it. But I still don't think we ought to delve into what the world, that's still taking a pagan practice.
Right.
It's still trick or treat, you just change the name trunk or treat.
And you're still gonna be enjoying that. I mean, you may start out, I'm not saying everybody, but it just seems like that's a fine line, because you may start out saying, you know, we're evangelizing, but then you're, you know, the dressing up and the whole night. Unless you're keeping it evangelism, if you're, I
That's
don't
not
know.
all clear truth.
Right.
I guess,
Go ahead, man.
I guess to me though, it's a mark of how far evangelism has fallen from the early church. How did the early church
Oh my,
evangelize?
wow.
They went out and they started casting out demons. Like if
Yeah.
you walked into a Halloween party and you started casting out devils of people, people will be on their face getting some real religion at that party, but because we're not moving in the power of God, and I'm not saying the love of God isn't important, that is not what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah,
Love and power have to go hand in hand.
sure.
But if we were doing what the early church was doing, they would have never needed a trunk or treat. Like, what are you talking about? Like, they would have just walked out on the streets and demons start fleeing here, demons start fleeing here, Halloween party has to disrupt, you know? I mean,
we are offering.
Great point.
I think we're offering the world like we're offering people a cheap copy of what the world already has, when we have something so much more real to offer them.
Yes.
We're trying to, copy custom of the world and dress it up.
but it's
But-
a less fun version.
But it's
To be honest,
it's still just a copy and imitation of what the world already has. What people are looking for is something they don't have and something they've never seen or experienced before, and that's what we can offer them. So if we're just, coloring things up and just fitting in with everybody else, we're not offering people anything different. We're not offering, it may be a safer, more fun alternative, and I believe community is important, and having events and holidays and things like that are important in community, but we have something so much more real to offer people, and if we're just offering them cheap imitations of the world, where's the difference?
Yeah, that really struck me when she said copy the world. Well, we should never copy the world. The world should be chasing after what we have, because it's real, like what she was describing.
That's what
copying
a lot of
the world.
Christianity does. I mean, you go to any Christian bookstore and they've got knockoff versions of secular or company brands. Like, they take a Sprite image and they try to make a Christian saying out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of copying in modern Christian culture. That's not creative or original.
We should be the benchmark.
We should be the ones.
We show people
Dress like him. I don't know about dressing like him, but yeah.
I think we show people a cheap God when it's just a mimicked version of what the world already has. Like, we serve the ultimate creator, the creator of all things. So why would we want to copy what the world has when, we serve the ultimate creator, the inventor of all things. So, why would we want to copy someone when we could be showing them something creative,
Yes.
the creative power of God?
Yeah, don't you feel that?
You
Yeah.
know, like you said, the benchmark, we should be
We
the
should
ones
be, right.
that people would want to follow after, because we're creators too, because we're made in God's image, and He's a creator, the ultimate creator. That same creative power is in us, so why would we want to copy when we can create?
Not only that, but I think one big issue I have, and I am not out there evangelizing, so I do not say this as like somebody who's somebody to be praised, because I'm not out there winning souls, and that's on me. But what I notice is Christians, and it is ironic with Halloween, they really try to trick people into becoming Christians.
Oh,
yeah.
So we're presenting a trunk or treat that's like
Drop the mic
really a
right
trick or
there.
treat. We're gonna make it sort of innocuous, but our real goal is to try to get you in the church, and our real goal is to try to get you saved. But there was nothing hidden about Old Testament or New Testament Christianity.
a cult means hidden. So
But that's
we're
what the
tricking
church
people in
does.
the
We keep
church.
saying if we use these methods, but really there's like an agenda underneath that. Now, if we're just going out to love people, saying like that's different, meet people's needs, that's different. Something like trunk or treat. Do the kids need candy? No, they don't need the candy. Do they need the games? They don't really need the games, but we might have a different motive with it. But we're using the same practice.
Man, I never thought about it like that.
We're just trying to.
I mean, that could work for anything, not just on Halloween.
Yeah,
If you have to
everything.
trick
But
people
that's
to
what
get
makes it
in church.
ironic. Because
Hey, we're
it's
having
like, wait a
Mother's Day
second.
contest. See how many we can get. We're trying to get you here, but really, we want you to
I mean, that's not really true love if you have an agenda and an ulterior motive to try to sneak people or trick people in. Jesus loved people as they were, and He spoke the truth to them, and it was the truth that set them free. He didn't have to trick or bribe or anything to get people to taste of the goodness that He had. He just loved people as they were. But when we are loving people with an agenda, it's not really true love.
Truth set them free. John Ramirez said something similar. Do y'all know who he is? Anybody? If you don't, you might want to Google him. He's an ex-Satanist. I mean, he literally controlled neighborhoods and ghettos in New York City through the power of the occult. He would bring demon powers to rule. I mean, he's like a big wheel in the occult. He's a Christian preacher now. John Ramirez, yes he is. Maybe, I'm trying to think when I heard him. He talks about this kind of stuff we're dealing with now. He's all for evangelism on Halloween night. But he said sort of what you're saying. Don't trick them in there. Don't get them there with trunk or treat. He said just have a flat out church service with evangelism. Cast out devils. Have people falling on the floor, repenting and weeping before the Lord. He said have that kind of evangelism. And he said I'm not against evangelism on Halloween night or any night, but don't hide it and dress it up. It's interesting. I just read that today. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is.
Well, that's fear.
It's like a haunted house except for hell.
It's like in every
It's
room you
just,
go.
how people.
I've never heard of that. Have y'all?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a big one.
Judgment House?
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of it.
It's just the fear tactic for salvation. That a lot of places do, the fire and brimstone
Because
kind
at
of.
the end, it's like is it a casket or something?
I've never
loved
gone through
ones
them.
passed away, whatever, and they got like the whole, that you go through each room and it's like in a whole skit scenario, whatever.
Do they do it at Halloween? So again,
Sorry,
it's a
Taylor
knockoff
did.
on a haunted house. I don't agree with haunted houses either.
CF,
Again.
what is it, Christ for the Nations? They do one that is all really, really good. And they're really spirit filled.
I said, I've never heard of all this stuff. I got to Google this.
I have friends who participated in that, like missionary friends, and so that big school, they always have a huge so I guess it might be a little different. Maybe not everyone is fear based.
Yeah. That's the first I've heard of it. We used to do haunted houses, like our youth group, that was a big deal. Haunted houses, churches a lot of times do haunted houses. Again, this is just me, I don't agree with it. Is illicit the right word I'm trying to say? Where it brings forth fear in you, it elicits fear, and that's not of God, ever.
Well, I mean, in 1 Thessalonians 5:22, it talks about keep away from all forms of evil.
All forms, even the appearance of it. I'm not there yet, y'all. I got a lot of things that need to be weeded out of my life.
I'm not there, but talking about it certainly helps you start looking
Yes.
closer at your life. You know what
Like
I mean?
Susie said earlier, gaining
Because I think we
knowledge
fall
on it.
into the thing like, well, there's these other things I'm still not sure about, so I'm just not going to do any of it. And I don't think, and you'll have people throw that against you where you're a hypocrite, but every time we can make a good choice in the direction of not doing things, like that's a movement in the right direction.
Right,
So,
Well, the word says that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
Right.
And it also says study to show yourself approved.
right.
If you don't know, like me, up until this year, me and the girls, we've done it. It's
Sure.
hard.
Yeah.
You're thinking, okay, there's nothing evil, we're not dressing evil. But it's like, once you have this knowledge where it's like, I've never studied how,
I know.
but it makes it really like, I don't want to support that, it makes a difference.
Totally. I wish somebody, in all those early years at my other church, even though our pastor said, don't do it, y'all, you don't need to be, nobody ever taught me why. Nobody showed me anything. It wasn't until that ex-witch came to our church, I believe, we really started hearing an ex-witch or ex-Satanist testimony,
And
man, that'll get you.
a lot of the experience that people have is when they have heard about it, it was from a lot of the hardline churches, like really harsh, judgmental, controlling. But if those churches are operating in spirits of control and manipulation, how do they have power over the witchcraft that they're operating in?
Good point.
So if there's control and manipulation, which is witchcraft in their churches, but then they're condemning judgmental against don't do this because it's witchcraft, well, you don't have authority over what you're practicing.
You're already in a form of witchcraft and you don't even know it.
it's just not going to be
It's
very
not gonna
effective.
set people free, or be very effective, like she said.
But didn't we have a video? Did we not have a cassette tape when I was a little kid? Somebody played a cassette tape of this lady who was a witch talking about
I
how
still have it. I still have it somewhere, maybe upstairs here.
I don't remember what that was. I just have some kind of distinct memory of that.
She was British. She was European.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a big time witch, like one of the highest levels of witchcraft in Europe, to the point that she literally saw Lucifer. And you know, we talk about the devil all the time. You know, the devil made me do it, like Flip Wilson. You know, y'all are too young for Flip Wilson, but it's like everything that, well, it ain't Lucifer making you do everything that sometimes you're tempted with. It's demonic forces. According to her, Lucifer rarely shows up, but when he does, she described what it was like when they would call him forth, primarily on Halloween. That's when they would call him forth, because he's not omnipresent like Jesus or God. He can't be everywhere at once. So they would call him forth, and that's where he'd be. And her testimony is amazing. I wish I could find that.
Yeah, I was
tag.
just thinking of when you were just like, I have this vague memory of this lady with this testimony.
Yeah, God set her free, big time set her free. I got to look at that. This stuff is not to make you fearful or scared. I hope you're not. I hope nobody leaves here fearful or scared. We have authority over this stuff. This demonic stuff we talk about, it's like, go. We have authority.
Well, you know, once you have the Holy Spirit, the stuff that you used to participate in and have fun with and enjoy, that desire is gone all of the time. You know, it just
pales.
You just, yeah. And, you know, the trick-or-treating and the haunted houses and all of that. The desire, the Spirit just redirects you into the things of God.
Yes.
And then you just don't desire to do them anymore.
That's right. Also, when you said that, I thought of the scripture, is it Philippians? You know, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever. The things we're supposed to think on. They're lovely, they're full of virtue, they're beautiful. That's what we're supposed to, that's what the Spirit redirects us to. And if we have to deal with demonic things, as we're supposed to, again, I remind you, these signs shall follow them that believe. They shall cast out devils in my name. When we deal with that, it's a beautiful thing because somebody's getting set free.
And I think
It's not focusing on darkness, but it's the freedom.
the freedom that you were talking about earlier, like separating from the world is not bondage, it's freedom, because when you're not, when you stop trying to mimic the world, then you can walk in the power you actually have. It
Yes.
sets you free to be who you're supposed to be, who you really are. It sets you free to walk in power when you stop trying to copy the patterns and behaviors of the world. It sets you free to be who you really are.
Yes.
So it's not bondage, it's freedom.
Well,
Wow.
you
I see that.
actually steer clear from that. Once you come away from it, and you steer clear from those things that bind you like that. It's repulsive,
It is repulsive.
you know. So, like I said, once you've gotten free of some things, and once your eyes come open and the knowledge is there, you recognize it, you steer away from it on your own sometimes, rather than the Spirit. Sometimes the Spirit don't have to direct you away. You know, when you see it for what it truly is, when you see the truth in that, you don't want to be a part of it.
I think, sorry, no, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about what she said, when she said be a part of it. You don't want to be a part of it when you really see things for what they are. We play around